Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we are told that Russia is evil and that they plan to do in the poor innocent in the United States. We're just trying to make a living, man. We're just trying to eat. But maybe it's the other way around. Let's talk. Hello, one and all. Garland Nixon here. And what we're told is that Russia is evil, man. These dudes are evil. And the United States, the people here, Europe, we're just trying to survive, bruh. We're just trying to eat, dude. We're just trying to live, man. And why is it Putin and these guys just want to hassle us? They want to take our stuff. They want to do just bad things, right? And, we're just here trying to make the world a better place, right? Well, those of us who have been paying attention over the last several years know that it's the other way around. We know that in around 2000, Vladimir Putin actually asked to join NATO, and the U.S. said, "Not happening." I mean, let's face it; it would be very expensive for Russia to join NATO because NATO, and not only that, I mean, not only would it be very expensive. What I mean is, the U.S. sells a lot of weapons to people based on fear mongering against Russia. But it would also clearly demonstrate the reality that there is no need for NATO if there is no threat from the East. And last but not least, Russia is kind of an honest actor. They're not going to go by the Western narrative. So how could you have NATO, an organization with, like, I don't know, Biden literally blowing up the pipelines of other NATO member organizations, and one of them, namely Russia, would like put their hand up in the room and say, "Hey guys, I don't know what the hell we're all pretending like that this was an act of God or something, or we don't know who did it. That bastard right there just blew up your pipeline." So it would be impossible to have someone outside of the U.S. rules-based order who's willing to live within the mad neocon narrative. Somebody outside of that, it wouldn't work for NATO. So bottom line, no Russia, NATO. But what we're told is this: the narrative that we're given in the West is that the West is an innocent actor and an honest actor and just trying to survive and protect the world and maintain an order that's in the best interest of everybody, blah, blah, blibbity, blah, blah. But I believe, in the same way, Ray McGovern, Scott Ritter said it. He says he considers Ray a mentor. Me too. I consider Ray a mentor, informal. I love Ray McGovern. But one of the things that Ray talks about, he's old CIA guy, old CIA analyst, old school, right? I'm talking 60s, 70s, whatever. One of the things that Ray says is, I mean, if you have an adversary, another country or whatever, you want to listen to what they say. Listen to them. If you want to know what they're going to do, listen to them, right? Wherein what the neocons say is the last thing we want to do is listen to them. First of all, they say to their people, in order to propagandize them, in order to propagandize the people in the West, the neocons will say, no, not only should you not listen to the enemy, you can't trust the enemy. You should just not pay any attention to what they say. Just listen to us, and anything they say, just believe the opposite. But we'll tell you, we have a narrative. We'll give you the true narrative. Ignore the enemy. It's the opposite of old school intelligence analysts that said, let's listen to what the enemy says and let's try to figure out something from there. Now, I'm going with old school, and here's what I have to say. If you want to know what the neocons want to do, if you want to know what their plans are, if you want to know what they're thinking, listen to what they say. Let's start off. What I'm going to go to, a lot of people have talked about it, but they haven't actually looked at it. They haven't actually gone over it and discussed it. The Rand Corporation, and I believe it was 2019, wrote a document called Overextending and Unbalancing Russia. They told you what they wanted to do. We want to overextend and unbalance Russia. Now, one might ask oneself, why? Why Russia ain't screwing with us? Well, you got to understand the neocons, but what we're going to do, in the spirit of, if you want to know what your adversaries are doing, listen to what they have to say. We're going to do that. We're going to look at that document today, Overextending and Unbalancing Russia. Now let's start. Let's go there, and let's talk about this document in a number of ways. For starters, I find it quite interesting that they put an editor's note in April of 2022 that says, we encourage you to explore this research and for blah, blah, blah. However, because Russian state media entities and individuals sympathetic to Putin's decision to invade Ukraine have mischaracterized this research in recent weeks. Mischaracterized it? Okay, well, I'm getting ready to characterize it. We also encourage you to explore this helpful resource on Russia's fire hose of falsehood approach to propaganda. Here's the bottom line. We can read it. Hey, I know when you read this, it is going to look bad like we're crazy and we're neocons, but that's just Russian propaganda. In other words, don't believe your lying eyes. Let's take a peep. Let's start here. Oh, excuse me. Our research on truth decay. Oh my God, we use CREST so you won't get truth decay, which is a phenomenon that is driven in part by the spread of disinformation. In other words, that's this whole thing. You're not smart enough. Here, we got some articles to tell you. We got some articles to lead you because you ain't smart enough to understand this on your own. Well, let's read it and see if we are. Okay, let's actually look through this thing. They say it's a blah, blah, blah. It's the brief summarize. This brief summarizes a report that comprehensively examines nonviolent cost-imposing options. Nonviolent. When's the U.S. ever done anything that was nonviolent? At home or abroad, right? And the U.S. and its allies could pursue across economic, political, and military areas to, now listen to what they want to do, to stress, overextend, and unbalance Russia's economy and armed forces and the regime's political standing at home and abroad. Now, here's my first question. Why? This is a country that has continually said, look, man, we want peace. Hey, we want to do business with you. Hey, we want to sell stuff. We want to work with you, right? Think about this. You talk to a person. What do you want, Garland? Man, I just want to work together. We're all trying to eat, bro. Tell you what, I'll sell you some rice. You sell me sugar. We'll work together. Hey, man, what do you got? Oh, we've got NATO. Okay, so that's a defensive organization. Yeah, I'll join that. No, but let me in. No, you can't get in. All right. Well, I'll just sell you rice. You sell me sugar. No, you're evil. So we want to unbalance and overextend Russia, which is, in my opinion, ethically, morally wrong. But let's continue. All right. Today's Russia suffers from many vulnerabilities, right? So they go on to say they have vulnerabilities, an aging and soon to be declining population, increasing authoritarianism under Vladimir Putin's now continued rule. And let me say this. Here's something I wonder. Authoritarianism, right? I've been to Venezuela. People in Venezuela, what are you, 60% approval rating for Maduro? Over 90% by U.S. polls, over 90% of the people in China are have a positive view of their government. Putin has 80-some% approval rating. Isn't it interesting that the governments and the leaders with the highest approval rating in the U.S. also seem to be, in the world, are viewed by the U.S., are portrayed by the U.S. as evil and authoritarian dictators. A dictator that's got 80% approval rating? Well, I'll put it like this. Let's be honest about it. Let's say, for the sake of argument, for 1 minute, that they were right. If a dictator had an 80% approval rating, that would technically mean that the people of that country wanted and liked that dictator. And they have a right. If the people of a country want a monarchy, if they want a communist country, if they want a whatever kind of country they want, if the people of that country have a particular leader and he's got an 80-some% approval rating, what the hell, that is, what doesn't matter what we call him. He's got an 80% approval rating. Well, he's a dictator. Well, I guess the people in that country want a dictator. But it's hard to argue that he's a dictator when everybody likes him. But at any rate, let's continue. Now, listen to this. And they say such vulnerabilities are coupled with deep-seated, if exaggerated, anxieties. Listen to this about the possibility of Western-inspired regime change. Now, look at this. The U.S. says they want to overextend and unbalance Russia's economy, armed forces, and regime change political standing at home and abroad. And then they go on to say that Russia has exaggerated anxieties about the possibility of Western-inspired regime change. You're trying to unbalance, overextend, and screw over their country in every way you can. Destroy their economy, screw over their politics. And then you say, And for some reason, I have no reason why they think we want to do regime change. I mean, come on, it's unreasonable anxieties. All we're trying to do is totally destabilize their country. But regime change? No, certainly not. I don't understand why they'd have exaggerated anxieties of that. Again, garbage and trash. Let's continue. Recognizes that some level of competition with Russia is inevitable, and they talk about it. So they say cost imposing options that could unbalance and overextend Russia. So they think about this too. The logic of that: you have a country with more nuclear weapons than you, and you want them unbalanced, politically unbalanced, overextended, militarily, everything screwed up. That could lead to somebody pushing the button. So the reality is, not only are these people evil, they're stupid and dangerous. Let's continue. Now listen to this. They talk about the burdens and they say, and this is where we're getting to today. Such cost-imposing options could place new burdens on Russia, ideally heavier burdens than would be imposed on the United States for pursuing these options. Ideally. In other words, look, we're going to hurt Russia. Now, ideally, it'd be nice, it'd be great if it hurts them more than it hurts us. But if it hurts us, who gives a shit? Because you know what? We're neocons and we're rich. It ain't going to hurt us but so much. It's going to hurt all the poor people. So, hey, screw them. I mean, if the poor people get hurt, so be it. The work builds, blah, blah, blah. Now, listen to this. It builds on the concept of long-term strategic competition developed during the Cold War. So they're saying we're going to take the Cold War to another level. That's all it is. We're going to take the Cold War to another level. The new report applies this concept to today's Russia. Okay, so they go on and they talk about what they want to do. Here's interesting one. Now, this is back in 2019. Okay, impose deeper trade and financial sanctions would also likely degrade the Russian economy. So they're saying we're trying to degrade the Russian economy. Why? Other than the fact that you're evil bastards. Why? That's simple, because they want to rule the world. Let me say something about what they're saying. They said we want to take the things that we did. I got to make this point. What they're saying here is we want to take the things that we did during the Cold War, right? And we want to expand on those things today. So what we used against the Soviet Union, we'll use that, and we'll use even more now. Now, recall, we were told that they hated the Soviet Union because of an ideology, because it was communist, and we hated communism, so we had to stop communism. Now, Russia's no longer communist, and we're saying we want to go after them even harder than we did when they were communists, which simply reveals something. We didn't go after Russia because they were communist. We went after Russia because they were a powerful country, and we wanted to rule the world. The United States wanted to rule the world, and Russia was in the way. Soviet Union was in the way. And so they said the cover story, the exoteric story, was to the people, they're evil communists, therefore we got to go after Russia. And the people of America were like, yeah, the commies, the Ruskies, oh, we got to go after them, right? The esoteric, the story inside was, hey, man, the only way we're going to rule the world is take out anybody who could stop us from ruling the world. We got to destroy Russia. We got to weaken Russia. We got to take them out so we can rule the world. It's just an evil plot to rule the world. All right, let's continue. Let us continue. Okay, the next, and we're reading this Rand report. Listen to this. And when you think about this was 2019, it sure makes it hard to believe that their story, that what happened in February of 2022 between Ukraine and Russia was just happenstance, that Russia just woke up one day and said, you know, I think we're going to invade next door country because we don't like democracy. We don't like democracy in Ukraine. The U.S. overthrew the government of Ukraine, installed a government, and then said Russia invaded the country because they don't like democracy, even though we installed a puppet government after we overthrew the democratically elected one. None of it makes sense. So we're going to continue. So they say, okay, sanctions would degrade the Russian economy. Now listen to this. Especially if such sanctions are comprehensive and multilateral. What are they doing now? What was the plan? They in 2019 they told you broad sanctions with a bunch of countries doing it, right? Europe, now listen to this. Their effectiveness will depend on the willingness of other countries to join in such a process. And what are they trying to do? Get as many countries as they can. Okay. Increasing Europe's ability to import gas from suppliers other than Russia could economically extend Russia and buffer Europe against Russian energy coercion. What do you know? They're looking out for Europe. Europe's getting that free, that really, really cheap gas from Russia. And Russia could use that gas against them, for instance. The United States already blew up Germany's pipeline. So let's not talk about Russia using coercion for energy coercion, right? Europe is slowly moving in this direction by building regasification plants for LNG. Oh, and where are they going to buy that LNG from? Texas. But, and so they go on. Okay. And they go on encouraging the immigration from Russia of skilled labor and well-educated youth. Well, let me say this about that. Let me say this about that. One of the things that the neocons have taught the Russians is that they hate their guts and that they're racist bastards, right? The liberals of the US, I mean, of the West are, some of the most racist bastards on earth. And they'll do anything that they have to do. And so the bottom line is this: they hate Russians with a racial passion, and they've taught the Russians that. So their plan to, quote, and let me read this again, to encouraging the immigration from Russia of skilled labor and well-educated youth. Well, now that ain't working so well, because the U.S. and their allies are like, we hate Russians, and you can't speak Russian, you can't eat Russian dressing. Oh, if you're Russian, you can't. If you're just ethnically born Russian, you can't run in the Boston Marathon. You can't sing at an opera in Berlin or New York. You can't. We don't want to read Dostoevsky or. So their plan was to encourage Russian, they called it brain drain, right? We're going to encourage Russians, young people, educated people, etc., to come west. Well, telling the Russians that you hate their guts and you don't want anything to do, and you have a racial hatred to Russia against Russians, ain't a real good plan if you're trying to encourage their people over here. But keep in mind something. They can't help themselves because they're racist bastards and they really do hate Russians. So they may write the neocons might write something down that says, look, man, we're trying to get Russians to move here. We're going to get all of the well-educated Russians to move away from Russia, and Russia will just be a bunch of stupid, uneducated people, right? Really, what do you think of Russians? God, I hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them. Don't you think they're smart enough to know that you hate them? And don't you think that if you're Russian and you're like, hey, move to New York City, really? Well, when I get to New York City, can I sing in an opera? Hell no, we don't allow your kind around here, Ruski. Oh, okay. Can I don't know, be in a play? Are you kidding me? You think we'd let a lowlife Russian be in our plays? Out of here, Ruski. We hate Russians. And the young, intelligent, well-educated Russians would be like, but I thought you wanted me to come join you. Shut up. We hate you. Oh, by the way, yeah, come on over. You can work cleaning toilets. Yeah, but I got a master's degree. We don't want to hear it. You're still a Russian. We don't like your kind. Shut up. Move here so your country will be destroyed. Oh, and did I mention that we hate your guts? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just saying, Rand Corporation came up with a brilliant plan to get Russian, young, educated Russians to move to the West. And part of their plan was to tell these young, educated Russians how much they despise them and they hate their culture, etc. So I'm just thinking, that part of the plan, not pointing any fingers, I'm just saying it could have been done better. All right, so let's move on. This is Rand Corporation telling you what they wanted to do. Telling you what they wanted to do. Let's go. Geopolitical cost imposing measures. And of course, look, this is the Free Syria Army. This is the people, those poor women, a bunch of women, those poor women you talk about schmucks. Anytime the United States comes to your country and arms you to fight somebody else, your ass is grass. You're done. And you deserve to be done if you're that stupid. Looking at history, and those are probably the Kurds, of course. Arab and Kurdish volunteers, Arab and Kurdish cannon fodder. That's what it is. That's what the Kurds were. They were cannon fodder. That's what the Taiwanese are, cannon fodder. That's what the Ukrainians are, cannon fodder. That is all the neocons know, cannon fodder. Okay, so now let's look back in 2019, what they were talking about doing. Providing lethal aid to Ukraine would exploit. Now, let me read this next sentence. Would exploit Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability, right? So they're saying then, look, we understand that Russia's greatest point of vulnerability, their brightest red line at whatsoever, any way, shape, or form is Ukraine. And so we can give a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Now, let me ask you this. Let's look at this. Let's look at this together. Let's look at this. Providing lethal aid to Ukraine would exploit Russia's greatest point of vulnerability, right? That's what they say. I got a question for you. Is that why they told us they were providing lethal aid to Ukraine? Now, what they said was, we're providing lethal aid to Ukraine to defend Ukraine's fragile democracy and the wonderful poor little Ukrainians, and they've been attacked by the evil Putin next door, and we got to provide Ukraine to defend democracy. But in 2019, they told you the truth, didn't they? They said, we can provide lethal aid to Ukraine to exploit Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability. So what they were really saying is this: we know that'll piss Russia off. We know that's Russia's greatest point of vulnerability. We know that will provoke the strongest action by Russia, and that's the hell why we're doing it. Now, that being said, how's that work out for the Ukrainians? They tell us they're doing this to defend Ukraine. Their weapons are, they're saying, here's what they said: we can provide lethal aid to Ukraine to exploit Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability. That's what they said. That's the reason they said they're doing it. Now, what did they tell us? They tell us we're providing lethal aid to Ukraine to protect Ukraine's fragile democracy that's been. It's all a lie, but all you got to do is read. They're giving weapons to Ukraine because they know that Ukraine is a vulnerability for Russia. That's all. But it doesn't sound like that they're defending, protecting, or helping out the Ukrainians. If you notice, when they said that, they didn't say anything about the people of Ukraine. Why? Because they're cannon fodder. And you don't talk about cannon fodder. You just throw it in front of cannons, right? So they go on to say other things: increasing support to the Syrian rebels, promoting. Now listen to this. Let's look at this one. Promoting liberalization in Belarus. Well, that almost sounds like a color revolution, which they tried. Likely would not succeed and could provoke a strong Russian response, which is exactly what they did. They knew it. But guess what? They did it anyway. That's how stupid the neocons are. They look at this thing and they say, look, we could try to overthrow the government of Belarus. Probably wouldn't work. It could provoke a strong Russian response, one that would result in a general deterioration of the security environment in Europe and a setback for the U.S. policy. Duh. So what did they do? Well, if we do it, it won't work, and Europe will be less secure. All right. So they tried to throw Belarus. Belarus became closer to Russia, and now they got nukes. And they did say, and would result in a general deterioration of the security environment in Europe. Did I mention Belarus now has nukes? So they knew what would happen. Hey, man, if we try it, it probably ain't going to work. And who knows, Belarus will get nukes or something. And then idiots and Biden and Blinken and these idiots were like, oh, yeah, well, you said it don't work. But if you don't know what we know, we're really smart. We're going to do it. Oops. Oh, crap, it didn't work. And Belarus now has nukes. Ooh, I guess they were right, huh? That's the level of intellect we're dealing with. Let us continue. And again, we're reading from Rand Corporation, Overextending and Unbalancing Russia from 2019, so we can see what the Rand Corporation said they were going to do. So when they lie and they say we're doing this to help Ukraine, when they lie and say we're doing this to promote democracy, they told you what they're going to do, and we're reading it now. How about this? Ideological and informational cost imposing measures, right? Now, listen to this. I find this very interesting. Diminishing faith in the Russian electoral system would be difficult because of state control over most media sources. Doing so could increase discontent within the regime, but there are serious risks that the Kremlin could increase repression or lash out and pursue a diversionary conflict abroad that might run counter to Western interests. So they're saying, hey, man, it wouldn't be easy to diminish faith in the Russian electoral system. Now, let's talk about that real quick. Again, it's immoral and unethical. Why would you want to defend? You said you stand for democracy, right? They got an electoral system. If you're fighting for democracy, wouldn't you help anybody who has an electoral system? No, you wouldn't, because you don't give a damn about democracy. It's all lies. But what they say is that they could diminish faith in the Russian electoral system. Two words, Russiagate. What they did was diminished faith in the United States electoral system. But interesting what they said. It would lead, what they're saying is, it is hard to assess whether political volatility and protests, so they're saying they wanted protests, would lead to a more extended Russia, less able or inclined to threaten Western interests abroad, right? So they're saying, excuse me, I got the wrong sentence. Let me read this. There are serious risks that the Kremlin could increase repression, right? So here's the bottom line. The United States they diminished the faith in their own electoral system, and then the United States increased repression. How about that? How about all the people that have thrown off Twitter, thrown off YouTube, to deplatform, all of that stuff? So the U.S. utilized, they said they wanted to diminish the faith in the Russian electoral system with Russiagate, with COVID, on and on. They developed, particularly with Russiagate, and with all the charges against Trump, they are diminishing faith in the U.S. electoral system, and they are responding with repression, censorship, etc. So, hey, you know what? They're telling us what they're going to do by going after Russia. Let's keep going. Listen to this. You're going to love this one. You're going to love this one. So this is how they're going to unbalance Russia in their plan in 2019. Creating the perception that the regime is not pursuing public interest. That the government of Russia or the United States is not looking out for the people. So they could encourage domestic protests. They could create the perception that the regime is not pursuing a public interest. Well, the Americans already believe that. They could focus on widespread, large-scale corruption, such as the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden schemes, and further challenge the legitimacy of the state. Next, encouraging domestic protest and other nonviolent resistance. Well, we know that game, right? That it says would focus on distracting or destabilizing the Russian regime and reduce the likelihood that it would pursue aggressive actions abroad. Pursue aggressive actions abroad, such as overthrow the governments of Libya, overthrow the government of Iraq, try to overthrow the government of Syria, Iran, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Havana. What the neocons meant was, we want to reduce the chance that they will stop our malevolent actions that are destabilizing nations abroad. Listen to this. Undermining Russia's image abroad would focus on diminishing Russia's standing and influence, thus undercutting regime claims of restoring Russia to its former glory. I don't know if you've been paying attention to Africa, but everybody's running around with a Russian flag. Africa, all you see is Russian flags. You see their flag and you see a Russian flag. So the idea of undermining Russia's image abroad, it ain't been working so well. How about China? What do they think of Russia? How about India? How about South America? Russia's beloved around the world, outside of the West. Outside of the West, the Westerners are so blind, but outside of the West, people kind of like Russia. So their idea of undermining Russia's image has undermined their own image. Further sanctions, the removal of, listen to this. This is what they said wanted. They want further sanctions. They wanted the removal of Russia from non-UN international forums, and boycotting such events as the World Cup could be implemented by Western states and would damage Russian prestige. But the extent to which these steps would damage Russia's domestic stability is uncertain, pretty much zero. Now, here's what they say. While none of these measures has a high probability of success, any or all of them would prey on the Russian regime's deepest anxieties. Now, think about how stupid these people are. We're like the regime, the government has anxieties. Think about this. Hey, what do you want to do? Well, those guys over there that work at that plumbing company. Yeah, we want to, prey on their anxieties. Like they're one big group with like common anxieties. Hey, we want to prey on the Russian government's anxieties and their fears and their thoughts for happiness. And they all want to have a fun life, and we want to talk about that. Like we'll bring the Russian government together into one entity, and we'll deal with this entity's emotions. Again, what is it? It is projection. It's simply saying the Russian government acts based on emotions, but not on logical and rational beliefs, right? And calculations. And they're like, yes, they're irrational and they're emotional. So we got to pray on that. What do you guys think? We hate them. We hate them. My God, we hate them. Oh yeah, and they're just so full of anger and hate. They're irrational, and they're so I mean they're not basing things on data and empirical evidence. It's purely their emotions. Oh, but then I mentioned how bad we hate them with all of our guts, with the passion and flame of 1,000 suns. We hate them, hate them, hate them. But they're not really bright because they just work based on their emotions. Imagine somebody doing that. There we go. That's the neocons. Projection. And they say none of these measures has a high probability of success. And they say these things might be employed as a deterrent threat to diminish Russia's active disinformation and subversion campaigns abroad. Now think about this. Think about this. These people say they want to deter and diminish Russia's active disinformation and subversion campaigns abroad. That's what they want to do, right? But wait a minute. They're saying we want to diminish faith in the Russian electoral system. We want to create the perception that the regime is not pursuing the public interest. We want to encourage domestic protests and other nonviolent resistance. We want to undermine Russia's image abroad. And they say, why? As a deterrent threat to diminish Russia's active disinformation and subversion campaign. You were literally setting forth a disinformation and a subversion campaign against the Russian state and saying you're doing that to deter Russia's disinformation and subversion campaign. Could you get any more projection than that? Any more hypocritical than that? Yeah, we got to stop their disinformation and subversion campaign. How you want to do that? Got a great plan. Here's what we're going to do. Disinformation and subversion campaign, which will, in fact, stop their disinformation and subversion campaign. All you got to do is listen to neocons. They'll tell you who they are. All right. Air and space cost imposing. I love the way they say this. Cost imposing measures. These are just attacks. This is just an attack on Russia. Let us continue. Reposturing bombers within easy striking range of key Russian strategic targets has a high likelihood of success and would certainly get Moscow's attention and raise Russian anxieties. The costs and risks of this operation are low as long as the bombers are based out of range of most of Russia's theater, ballistic, and ground-based cruise missiles. So you want to put bombers near Russia within easy striking range of their strategic targets. And you're going to do that to destabilize them. And it'll work as long as we're out of their range of their missiles. Well, here's the problem. If you're just doing it to screw with them, what do you care if you're in range of their missiles? Because you're not going to attack them. They're not going to attack you. You're just doing it to bluff, to scare them. What are you doing? Let's put a bunch of bombers around this guy. Now, again, I thought Russia was the threat. You're saying they're a threat. What are you going to do? We got to put bombers all around them so we can attack them anytime we want. We want them stressed. We want them afraid. We want them to think we're going to attack them every day. Why? To protect ourselves from them. Again, listen to neocons. They'll tell you. Reposturing fighters so they are closer to their targets than bombers as a way to achieve higher sortie rates to compensate for their smaller payloads would likely concern Moscow even more than reposturing bombers. But the likelihood of success is low and risks are high. Right? So what you're saying is, okay, one of the things we want to do is we want to surround Russia and make them think we're preparing for war. Listen to this. Deploying additional tactical nuclear weapons to locations in Europe and Asia could heighten Russia's anxiety. You want them, a country, enough to significantly increase investments in its air defenses. Well, that's one that worked. Good job. Here's what you said. We want to freak Russia out, so they have to put a lot more money in their air defense. And how'd that work out for you, buddy? Good job. I gotta give the neocons a thumbs up for that. You did a good job of provoking Russia's investments in their air defense system, so much so now that they got the best air defense systems in the world. So that was maybe not the smartest thing in the world, but it was effective. You got to give them the credit. Repositioning U.S. and allied ballistic missile defense systems to better engage Russia's ballistic. Okay, so, Russia already knows that the ballistic missile defense crap is worthless. So you can do that if it makes you feel good, but more than likely not, they're doing that to make money for the companies that are building those worthless things. There are also ways to get Russia to extend itself in strategic competition, right? Developing new low observable long range bombers. Yeah, imagine that. Imagine a bunch of people who are getting a bunch of money from the military industrial complex saying, what is your plan? Oh, we got to build more planes. We got to build bombers, things that we'll never use, missile defense. We got to spend trillions. Why? To scare the Russians or something, overextend the Russians. And is that conveniently going to put a lot of money in your pocket also? Sure, but that has nothing to do with it. We're just trying to scare the Russians here, dude. Will I get filthy, stinking rich? Yes. Will I fill my pockets? By all means, certainly. But that's just incidental. I'm not trying to get rich, not trying to fill my pockets, not trying to help my donors. Certainly that would never cross my mind. I'm just throwing that out there saying, if we spend a lot more money on defense and we make the people who support me rich, make my stocks increase, I get filthy, stinking rich, it would overextend and unbalance, right? Whatever the hell, it would do something, but I'd get rich. That's the reality. Okay. And they're talking about B-2s and B-21s would be worrisome for Moscow, as would develop autonomous or remotely piloted strike aircraft and produce them in high numbers. All they're saying is, we got to, and they're saying all options would likely incentivize Moscow to devote ever greater resources to make its command and control systems harder, more mobile, and more redundant, right? So what you're saying is this: let's spend a lot of money on building up our military, and they'll spend a lot of money on building up their military. Well, if you do that, isn't that going to cancel you out? And they'd be like, who cares? Because the idea was to put money in our pockets. Perhaps you use all this had something to do with Russia or the strategic defense or bullcrap like that. No, we're just trying to eat, bro. We're just trying to eat, and we want to eat well. Listen to this. As for a likelihood of success, some options are good cost-imposing strategies, but some, such as investing more in arms or other electronic warfare technologies, are better than others, right? And some approaches should be avoided. The United States might goad Russia into a costly arms race by breaking out of the nuclear arms control regime, right? But the benefits are likely to outweigh U.S. costs. So they're saying, hey, man, here's what we're going to do. Let's get out of these nuclear arms control treaties, and they'll have to spend more on nukes. Well, they already got more nukes than you do. And what's the point of that? Because the nukes could get everybody killed. They don't give a damn. They're making money off nukes too. And their thing is, hey, you notice a lot of this is, let's get Russia to spend more money on arms and let's us spend more money on arms. And who's going to get paid? Oh, by the way, who supports Rand Corporation financially? The Pentagon. Get out of here. Right? So they go on, and here's all the things we could do. Hooray. Maritime cost imposing measures, right? Increasing U.S. and allied naval forces posture and presence in Russia's operating areas, right? So they're saying increasing naval R&D efforts, research and development, spend more money, spend more money, spend more money. Shifting nuclear posture towards SSBNs would entail increasing the percentage of U.S. nuclear triad assigned to SSBNs by increasing the size of that fleet. Those are your nuclear subs, right? So they're talking about that. They'd mount a vigorous diplomatic and informational campaign to dissuade coastal NATO and non-NATO states from participating, blah, blah, blah. So they go on to say, spend more money. Oh, by the way, spend more money. Oh, I think we need to spend more money. Land and multi-domain cost-imposing measures. What they're saying is money-making measures. Increasing U.S. forces in Europe. Increasing European NATO member ground capability. Deploying a large number of NATO forces on the Russian border. Now, think about this. Why would you want to do that? They're saying, think about what they're saying. We want to put more bombers near Russia. We want to put near more fighters near Russia. We want to put near more nukes near Russia. We want to put more NATO forces on Russia's border. Gee, I wonder why Russia reacted like this? I mean, come on, we're innocent. You've got something in writing that says we want to put more Navy around them. We want to put more nukes around them. We want to put more nuclear subs around them. We want to surround them with bombers that are closer. We want to surround them with fighters that are closer because we want to stop them from being such a threat. That's the reality. Read what they say. This is a RAND report. Developing but not deploying an intermediate range missile, incremental investments in new technologies. All they're talking about is spending money, man. This is a big money-making scam. It's a scheme. It's an ATM. It's a money laundering operation. So most of this, how do we overextend and destabilize Russia, is how do we fill our filthy, stinking pockets and accuse Russia of doing what we're doing. Implications for the Army. The U.S. Army should rebuild its linguistics and analytic expertise on Russia. So they're basically saying we should prepare for war with Russia. We got to get bombers closer to Russia. We got to get fighters closer to Russia. We got to get nukes closer to Russia. The Army should get more prepared to fight Russia. All they're talking about is preparing for war with Russia to extend and destabilize. Look, if you keep preparing for war with Russia, at some point Russia is going to believe that you're planning to go to war with them. But the reality is this: all these people are getting paid doing that. Let's continue. And you keep seeing this. The Army should consider investing and encouraging the other services to invest more in capabilities, right? More systems, fire protection capability, instrument, longer range. So it's just more about spending money. If the Army were not directly involved in extending Russia per se, it would play a key role in mitigating the blowback. All the options to extend Russia incur some risks. As a result, enhancing U.S. deterrence posture in Europe and increasing U.S. military capabilities might need to go in hand with any move to extend Russia as a way of hedging against the chance of tensions with Russia escalating into conflict. So we're going to surround Russia with missiles, surround them with bombs, surround them with fighters, to stop them from being a danger to us. And we got to build our military up and our army up just in case they decide they want to go to war. But we're surrounding them and preparing for war with them, surrounding them with every weapon we can and saying it's to deter them and saying, but you never know, those crazy people might want to go to war. It's insanity. Conclusions. Here's their conclusions. The most promising options to extend Russia are those that directly address its vulnerabilities, anxieties, and strengths. And what do they say? Its greatest vulnerability. What do they say its greatest vulnerability was? Ukraine, right? In that regard, Russia's greatest vulnerability in any competition with the United States, it is its economy, which is comparatively small and highly dependent on energy exports, right? So what they're saying is that, hey, man, look, we got to go after these people and we've got to use their highest area of weakness, right? And we got to go after their economy. Ukraine, sanctions. What are they doing? See, they told you in 2019 what they were going to do. And now they're going to lie to everybody else and say this is about something else. It's simple. And Russia's not stupid. What, you think they can't read? Russia's sitting there looking at I got it. I brought this RAND report up. You think they can't read it? So the Pentagon's saying they want to surround us. They want to put weapons all around us. They want to load Ukraine up with weapons. They want to destroy our economy. Yet over my dead body, we're going to fight like hell. And that's why Russia's fighting. And can anybody blame them? What would the United States do if some other country said, we're going to destabilize and overextend the United States? We're going to surround them with missiles and bombers and fighters and put troops on their border and all that stuff. Why would you do that? Unless you're an insane, warmongering fascist. And that's what the neocons are. They're fascists. This is a fascist. This is fascism 101. That's all it is. Hitler could have wrote it about Poland or the Soviet Union or anybody. It's fascism 101. Most of the options here, including those listed, are in some sense escalatory and would most likely prompt some Russian counter-escalation. right? Thus, besides specific risks associated with each option, there's additional risks attached to a generally intensified competition with a nuclear armed adversary to consider. You think you're going to surround them with missiles, nukes. You're going to surround them with nuclear capable bombers. You're going to surround them with nuclear capable fighters. You're going to put troops on their border. You're going to surround them with nuclear subs. And you're like, now, we got to consider the fact that they got nukes and this could be dangerous. Well, if you consider that, why do you want to do all of that? Because they're fascist, and this is just what fascists do. Finally, although Russia will bear the cost of this increased competition less easily than the U.S., both sides will have to divert national resources from other purposes. Okay? There you go. Look at this. Here's another one. News release. Nonviolent ways the U.S. could exploit Russian vulnerabilities. Extending Russia. Well, let me ask you a question. Think about this. Let's talk about this. So what they said is, we want a nonviolent way to extend Russia. Okay, give me your nonviolent way. All right. We're going to surround them with bombers. We're going to surround them with fighters, all nuclear capable. We're going to put troops on their border. We're going to put more nukes on their border. That's your nonviolent plan. That's nonviolence. Nonviolence. Hey, I'm going to act nonviolent. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go get a AK-47 and I'm going to point it at your head and cock the trigger. That's a nonviolent action. I haven't actually pulled the trigger. Well, and I must consider that it's possible that you'll react because, hey, I got a right to do that. It's my right. I got a gun. And if I want to point it in a certain particular area, it just happens to be your head and cock the hammer back. Hey, yeah, I might want to do that. But I'm just saying there's no reason for you to get out of hand here, right? Bottom line is, this was their plan. Well, let's discuss this. How has that brilliant plan worked? That's the plan. They lie to American people. They say everything else, but let's talk about how that plan has worked. Number one, is Russia overextended and unbalanced? Are they weaker? Well, they went after Russia economically, right? So economically, they unleashed every sanction they could possibly have, and Russia was stood up to every sanction. And not just stood up to every sanction. That's not the only thing. It's inspired other countries to say, wow, people can live through sanctions with the U.S. Wow, people can make it. And now these other countries are saying, well, not only is Russia standing up to U.S. and the sanctions of the empire, but like they're doing business with us. I want to do business with Russia. And other countries that are sanctioned by the U.S. are saying, well, we can do business with Russia because the sanctions don't seem to bother Russia. I'm not saying they don't bother them, but they're weathering them well. They're weathering them far better than anyone has ever weathered U.S. sanctions. And the bottom line is this: their economy is a lot stronger, than they thought, than the Americans thought. And here's the big thing you got to understand. When the U.S. says Russia's economy is the size of South Korea or Italy, whatever the hell, right? What they're saying is based on GDP, gross domestic product. But that was created by Wall Street and the IMF. It is a very, very flawed standard for measuring an economy. There's purchasing parity. There is a lot of other things. Output. What do you actually make? How much steel do you make? How much, various things do you make? How much can you buy with the amount of money that you have? How many things do you make on your own? How self-sufficient are you? Do you have your own energy? Do you have your own food? Can you grow your own food? Is your military powerful enough to defend itself? How's your military technology? Russia's a country. Last time I checked, does Italy make their own fighter planes? Does South Korea? Do they make their own engines? Have they developed their own? Do they have a space program comparable to the United States? All the things that the Russians have. How does the Russians, if they're nothing but a gas station with that think they're a country, if they're no more economy than South Korea or Italy or whatever the hell, Niger or whatever, then how is it that they produce these technological feats, and that they produce the amount of military hardware and military technology and technology period that they do. How do they do all of this stuff if they're just stupid guys running around fighting with shovels and washing machine chips? Doesn't make sense. You're telling me that the Russians are stupid and ignorant, that they're poor, they have no money, they are just a tiny little small country economically, but then you're telling me they're powerful enough they just want to wipe out Europe and take over the world. Those two things are incongruent, right? Let's keep going. So the economic attack on Russia to destabilize and overextend Russia has been a flop. Okay, let's talk about Ukraine. The other part of it they said was Ukraine is Russia's greatest vulnerability. We can exploit that. How's that work? How's that work? We're going to do that, right? Well, you know what Russia has, as Barack Obama said, escalatory dominance. So Russia is taking their time and they're pounding Ukraine into the ground, which we knew that they would. But the other thing that's happening is the world is looking at the weapons and they're saying, man, those Russian weapons seem to be working pretty good, and the Western weapons don't seem to be working so great. Right now, you got to buy tanks based on the Ukraine debacle. Would you buy a Leopard tank? I mean, let's face it, if you want a fireplace, they burn pretty damn well. If you want, like, hey, let's have a fire and roast some marshmallows, a Leopard 2 tank may be a good option. But if you're looking at fighting somebody, you might want to go with a T-90, right? You might want to go with the Russian tank. If you want an anti-aircraft system, do you want to go with the Patriot? I'll put it like this. If the Russians are around, that Patriot lasts an hour. Turn it on, and in comes some Kinzhal missiles. No Patriot system. I mean, on and on. Look what the Russians are doing with drones. Look at the success they're having on the battlefield. Bottom line is this: one of the things that has happened is that people are looking, whether it's valid or not, people are looking at the Russians' electronic warfare systems. They're looking at their planes. They're looking at all that stuff, and they're saying, you know what? That stuff ain't bad. It ain't bad. It works pretty well. And the U.S. stuff's European stuff seems to get being blown to hell. But the Russian stuff seems to be working pretty well on the battlefield to me. So bottom line is, if countries out here want to buy military hardware, it looks to me like a lot of countries are going to be easing away from the U.S. military hardware but trying to buy stuff from Russia. So that hasn't worked so well. Let's next talk about getting Europe away from Russian energy so they would not be vulnerable to energy coercion. That is one that for the history books, because everyone in the world, everyone with the exception of some idiot lunatic liberals in the West, everybody knows that Biden's boys blew up Nord Stream. Everybody knows that happened. They knew that the Biden team blew up Nord Stream. So now the argument that you're doing this to protect Europe from energy coercion, when in fact you use violence and energy coercion against Europe, particularly Germany. You used violent energy coercion against Germany to protect them from energy coercion against Russia. And now what's going on? Now the French and the Germans are asking, why is it you're charging us anywhere from 4 to 7 times the amount for LNG that you're charging other people? I can answer that, because you stupid sons of bitches will pay it. They ought to charge it. You know what? P.T. Barnum said there's a law. It's a crime against God and nature to allow a sucker to keep his money. That's why they're doing it, because you're a sucker. Why are you charging us so much? Because you're stupid enough to pay it. No hard feelings, guy. If you were smarter, if you were wiser, I wouldn't be able to do this to you. It's like me walking up with something I don't know. Walking up with this hat. Hey, got a hat for you, buddy. Yeah, and you're like, man, that hat will look like about $10. I want $500 for that hat. Why? Because you're stupid enough to pay me $500. I want $500 for the hat. Of course, it ain't worth $500, but it is if you're an idiot. And that's how things go. Hey, you were getting cheap Russian gas from the European, from Russia. Your economy's working well. Your industry's working well. Everything's going pretty well for you. Oh, great. But I think you should stop because, I mean, the Russians, they're going to do you dirty. Well, we don't want to stop. Just a minute. I'll blow up your pipeline. Boom. Yeah, you bet you'll stop now, won't you? Hey, you blew up our pipeline. No, it was somebody else. We don't know who blew up your pipeline, and you better not know either. Okay, we don't know who blew up our pipeline. Could have been the Russians, maybe the Martians. I don't know. But you told me not to know. I don't know. Everybody in the world knows. It is not the elephant in the room. It is a blue whale in a phone booth. Everybody knows the right. I mean, especially the Germans. They are the God in heaven. The German government is the most pathetic. They're the most pathetic people on earth. The world is looking at them with disdain. When you say Olaf Schultz, you say the German government, I put my head down and I shake my head as a man. As a man, I look at Schultz, I look at those people and I say, Schultz is not a man. Not a man at all. He's not an adult. And I mean, I just have no respect for that guy whatsoever. They blew up his pipeline, and his answer is, thank you. I'll do what you told. I'm still close with the Bidens. We work together. You don't work together. You work for him. You are the worst kind of lapdog. You're a traitor to your country. Olaf Schultz is a traitor. Schultz is a traitor. The Germans have a quisling government. It's interesting that Germany installed the Vichy government in France. You know what I mean? They installed quisling traitorous governments all over the place when they overthrew countries. And now what happens to Germany? Now, today, they got traitors amongst them. They got a quisling government, and the Germans are marching around with blue and yellow friggin' flags, and their trains and buses all painted blue and yellow, saying we're better than the Russians. The Russians aren't really Europeans. We're really Europeans. Germans are getting what they got coming, sadly. I don't like it. I don't want it to happen. I don't say that about the German people. I love the German people, but the German leadership is a sad state of affairs. And at some point, and I've said this time and again, I think the people in some of these countries in Europe will get to the point where they understand how badly that they've been betrayed. And I think there will be violence at some point against some of these leaders. I believe at some point, I oppose it. I'm against violence, all those things. But you mark my word, one of these days, some of these leaders are going to be on trial. Some of them may be executed. Some of them may not even live to get on trial. So when the people of Europe understand the level of betrayal that they have been subjected to, this could get really, really ugly. The only issue is when. So we got the economy, the sanctions. We've got, they were going to overthrow Belarus, or try to overthrow Belarus. And what do they got? Belarus is now in Russia's orbit directly, and it has nukes. So don't even think about it. Everything they did, everything the neocons did went bad. And what is their argument now? Hey, we got to stop doing this and go after China. These people are pathetic. But as I said, that's a RAND report. Let me bring it up so you can see it. I want you to see that RAND report. I would recommend that you take time to go read it. And it's called Overextending. Let me do this so you can see it. Overextending and Unbalancing Russia. Assessing the impact of cost imposing options, right? And you go over here, and again, they try. So there's a full report. This is a research route. So there's a full report. Extending Russia, competing from the advantageous ground, right? And you can see that key findings: Russia's weaknesses lies in the economic domain, right? Russia's greatest vulnerability in any competition with the United States is its economy, which is comparatively small and highly dependent on energy. The Russian leadership's greatest anxiety stems from the stability and durability of the regime. Well, bad news, Putin's got 80% approval rating. So I think it's stable and I think it's durable. And they go on, geopolitical measures to bait Russia into overextending itself are likely impractical, or they risk second-order consequences. So go on. This is it. Read that. It's available. That's the full report. Extending Russia, competing from an advantageous ground. Here's a research brief on it. Overextending and unbalancing Russia, assessing the impact of cost-imposing options. And the bottom line is, as we've reviewed, everything that they planned to do not only failed, but backfired. everything they've done has backfired. So that's the neocons. If anyone tells you that they have some other plan for Russia, if anybody tells you that they were standing, that the U.S. is standing for democracy in Russia, standing for peace, defending poor little Ukraine from an evil Putin who wants to invade it, read that article, share that article, and say this article was written years before the Ukraine conflict. Here's the obvious answer. How did they know? How did they wrote something years before the Ukraine conflict, and then when the Ukraine conflict got started, everything they said in that plan, in their plans for overextending and unbalancing Russia, they did. It's almost like it was a plan. Almost like it was a plan. All right. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to check out the super chats. Check out and see if we got some super chats. I think there may be some. We always get great questions with the super chat. So we'll go over this. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Great talk, Garland. I always appreciate your informed point of view. Enjoy the coffee. Thank you very much. Esoteric teachings. Well, here's the way I look at it. Sometimes I just bring up information and data. That's how I come to my conclusions, with empirical data, with information, right? And this is informative. We looked at the information. We went over it together. I told you the name of it so you can find it. And to me, that we can learn together. James says, great program tonight. Thanks a lot, James. Terry says, Russia is giving us all a chance to breathe. Long live Putin and long live Brooks. Brooks, listen to me. Terry, Russia. Oh, already got that. James, great program. All righty. I'm not thinking as clearly here anytime I'm doing the same damn super chats over and over. How about we go with this? Rob says, thank you, Garland. How do you imagine the West can overcome its disastrous credibility deficit? It can't. It's just going to get worse. There's no way to do it, because they've been saying this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is how it's going to happen, and they've been wrong about everything. And the people in, I don't know about Europe, but the people in the U.S. are slowly waking up, and they got the neocons have a big problem going into the election season, because you have people, granted, I ain't going to say RFK Jr. don't have some holes in his swing, some big ones, particularly when it comes to Israel, but I'm just saying RFK Jr. is saying some things about foreign policy that's highly upsetting to the neocons. Trump is saying some things about foreign policy that's highly upsetting to the neocons. Cornel West is saying some things about foreign policy that's highly upsetting to the neocons. So now the American people are at least getting the opportunity from various ideological perspectives. They're getting an opportunity to hear some pushback in an election. That's important. You never get pushback during an election against empire. Never. People don't understand how important that is. Usually you get some, they want to give us John McCain versus John McCain. That's all they ever want to give us. If we think back to 2008, we thought we had an option with Barack Obama versus John McCain. We thought we had something different. We didn't. We just had John McCain versus John McCain, and we thought we had something else. That's what they want to create. That's all they want to create. So I don't see the U.S. either externally or internally regaining any credibility whatsoever. Things are only going to get worse as far as the credibility of the neocons. How about this? Thanks a lot from Jura. Really appreciate it. We keep going. Let's look on Rockfin. Scott Johnson. Thanks a lot, Scott Johnson. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, you all. If you came here late and you didn't get a chance, you should watch the whole video. It's a good idea, because I went over this particular RAND report, and it was written before the Ukraine conflict started, and they told you everything they wanted to do during the Ukraine conflict. Don't get no better than that. If you want to know what the neocons want to do, just simply look at what they've been saying. Thanks a lot, you all. Have a great day. Don't forget, there's a number of ways you can help support the channel, and it is highly appreciated. What's this? Great talk, Garland. I always appreciate your informed point of view. Oh, okay. I think we got everything. Oh, we got another one. How about this? Thanks, Garland, for your courage to bring up the plight of the Palestinians. Many share your feelings, but few have the courage. Thank you very much. I think it's just like what I got to do. I think it's just what I got to do. It's reality. It's truth. Very important to me. Critical point. The Palestinians, Julian Assange. I mean, those are the things that we should stand up and speak. All of us who have any level of conscious or not conscious conscience or knowledge should speak up for those critical issues. Free Julian Assange. I always got to say that. And of course, the Palestinians, are living in an apartheid state, and that's unjust. And we should all speak out against that. The same people, the same fascists who are trying to drag us into a dangerous conflict with Russia, China, whoever the hell else, are the same fascists who are in favor of the apartheid state going after the Palestinians, and that's not right. That is not right, and we're going to stand up against it. How about that? And I say we, me, and my people in the chat, and all of us, we are, all of our friends. We're going to do that. We're going to do what's right. By the way, don't forget. You can help the channel if you can afford it. I would certainly appreciate it. Buymeacoffee.com is great. You can go to Buy Me a Coffee and it'll say like, buy Garland a coffee for $5 and how many you want to do. And now Buy Me a Coffee actually is like Patreon in that you could say, well, I just want to do this $5 or whatever it is once a month, and they'll repeat it. So that'd be great if you could become the equivalent of a Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee or on patreon.com if you so choose. Then all my information scrolling across, you can see the other options there, such as you join my Telegram channel. PayPal's an option. Certainly there's my Cash App information is there. Last but not least, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. That is my alternative platform in case YouTube tosses me, or some of the things have been censored on YouTube. You can still find them on Rockfin. So go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, become a member. It doesn't cost anything, and you can watch everything I do. Please, if you can afford it, become a sponsor. That's $14.99 a month. That's a subscriber. If you can afford it, you don't have to, but if you can afford it to help the channel, or join for a year, they give you a couple months free, so it comes to like 12 something a month if you can afford that. But even if you can't, go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon and become a member. Thanks a lot, everybody. Peace. Let me make sure I didn't miss any more super chats. All right. Thanks a lot, you all. Have a wonderful evening. I'll talk to you again soon. Peace. I'm out.